So, Bethesda recently announced the anniversary edition of Fallout 4, marking 10 years since its first release back in November 2015. And I don't know about you, but that instantly made me stop and think, has it really been that long? 10 years is a big stretch of time in gaming. We've gone through entire console generations, trends have come and gone, and what we expect from RPGs has changed quite a bit. So naturally, I wanted to go back and see how Fallout 4 actually holds up in 2025, both in the way it plays and how the story lands today. The Anniversary Edition itself is basically the complete Fallout 4 package. All of the big expansions like Automatron, Far Harbor and Nuka World, plus the smaller workshop DLCs, and then, on top of that, over 150 pieces of Creation Club content, all bundled and accessible through an updated Creations menu. So, if you're new, this is genuinely a one-stop entry point. Everything you'd ever want to use or try is just there, ready to go. For returning players though, it's more of a convenience upgrade than a whole new adventure. There's no massive new quest lines here that's going to fundamentally change the memory of Fallout 4. It's more like Bethesda saying, here's the whole experience in one place. No digging, no mod juggling, enjoy. For me, going back into Fallout 4 comes with history. I played Fallout 3 in New Vegas to death, and New Vegas especially is the benchmark for story and role-playing in the series. So I always knew the tone I was stepping back into. Ruin, rust, and that lonely kind of beauty you only get in a post-apocalyptic world. Fallout's always been great at that. And if you're someone who loves scavenging every drawer, every container, and slowly building and improving every piece of gear, this genuinely scratches that itch better than most games ever have. I've also played Fallout 4 pretty much across everything, Xbox, PlayStation, and now PC. For this playthrough and review, I'm on PC through Steam. On PC, especially now, the game just runs the way you wish it had on release. So this revisit wasn't just for nostalgia's sake. It's a genuine question. Is Fallout 4 still worth playing today, especially with the Anniversary Edition coming up? Let's dive in. Fallout 4's story drops you into that familiar alternate history wasteland, where the world ended not with just slow decline, but with nuclear fire. The bombs fell in 2077, and by the time we step into the Commonwealth, nearly 2 centuries have passed. The world has moved on, rebuilt itself in fractured ways, but still full of visible scars. And you're not just some wanderer this time, you're the sole survivor of Vault 111. You were there when the bombs dropped. You had a life before all this, a home, a family, and that life was ripped away from you in minutes. Your partner murdered, and your child Sean is taken. Everything from that point forward becomes about trying to understand what happened, where Sean is, and how the world has changed while you were frozen. When you finally step out of the vault, the world doesn't greet you with answers. Instead, it gives you ruins and scattered fragments of what used to be a familiar place. But there are still pieces of your past lingering. Codsworth, your old Mr. Handy, is still there trying to keep the illusion of normality. Dogmeat shows up when you need a companion most, and slowly you're introduced into the bigger picture. The factions shaping the Commonwealth. The Brotherhood of Steel with their militaristic, technology must be controlled mindset. The Railroad fighting quietly in the shadows. The Minutemen trying to rebuild the communities. And the Institute, working from below with an unsettled vision for the future. At the centre of it all, this question that Fallout 4 really leans into. What does it actually mean to be human? The synths complicate everything. They look like humans, they think like humans, and they feel. So when you're told they're just machines, well, the game encourages you to decide how you actually feel about that. And that choice carries weight, more than you realise early on. I'm not going to dive into heavy spoilers, because if you're going into this for the first time, those late game reveals genuinely land. There are a few twists that hit emotionally, not in a forced or a theatrical way, but in that slow realization style that Fallout has always done best. The kind of moment where you sit back and think, right, okay, that changes everything. What I love is how the story never forces you down a single path. Yes, there are clear main storylines, but how you walk that line and who you bring with you changes how the world reacts and ultimately where you end up. Even the small choices matter. A conversation, a settlement that you choose to support or ignore, a faction you align with early without realizing what that will mean later on down the line. It's the same thing I mentioned in my Outer Worlds review. These kind of branching narratives make your playthrough feel like your version of Fallout 4, not just the Fallout 4 story arc. And honestly, that's a big part of why the story kept me hooked. The drive to find Sean is a strong enough emotional anchor on its own, but the journey of who you become along the way is what keeps you exploring, scavenging, and pushing deeper into the Commonwealth. There are so many times I'd sit down meaning to just progress the main quest, and 4 hours later I'd be elbow deep in crafting materials at Sanctuary or helping a settlement clear out raiders. It's the kind of story and world that you don't just play through, you live it. One thing that Fallout has always been known for is its characters, and Fallout 4 is no different. The people you meet out there in the Commonwealth feel like they've been shaped by the world they live in, scarred by it, but clinging onto whatever sense of identity or purpose they can. They're memorable not just because they're loud or quirky for the sake of it, but because the game gives them enough space to exist as they are in this broken world. The first group you interact with, the Minutemen, sets the tone for that. You're not just meeting quest givers, you're stepping into the idea of rebuilding, of trying to bring back some sense of community after everything's collapsed. Once you take them back to Sanctuary and start restoring the place, it's more than just a settlement menu. You actually feel the beginnings of something hopeful, and every faction you come across after that pushes a different view of what hope, control, or survival should look like. It's not about loving or hating them, it's about forming your own opinion on who's right for this world. And when it comes to dialogue, Fallout 4 handles that really well. Conversations feel like they belong in this universe. Sometimes blunt, sometimes emotional, sometimes cynical in that people who have seen too much kind of way. It's written to evoke reactions, not just passive listening. Characters can frustrate and surprise you, make you rethink your choices, or make you feel protective of them. That emotional push and pull is what makes the story stick. Because you create your protagonist, how they look, and the choices they make, you naturally build a connection with them. These choices you make don't just change the world, they reflect back into who your character becomes. If role-playing is something you enjoy, Fallout 4 gives you the space to lean into that fully. Your version of the sole survivor can be compassionate, ruthless, pragmatic, heroic, whatever you choose. The narrative wraps around that approach enough that it feels personal. And since we're already talking about shaping the story yourself, if you're enjoying this review so far, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up and hitting that subscribe button. It generally helps the channel grow, especially in this vast wasteland. Thank you! One thing that Fallout 4 does really well is the way that the gameplay loop ties into the story. You can mainline the narrative if you want to, run those core missions back to back and wrap up everything in about 28 hours. But realistically, the game doesn't feel like it's meant to be played that way. The Commonwealth invites distraction. You'll step out to progress the main quest and suddenly Preston Garvey pops up reminding you yet another settlement needs your help. And yes, the memes are accurate. But what starts as an obligation very quickly becomes a genuine part of how you shape the world. Because once you start helping those places out, you don't just walk away. You start trying to improve them. And that's where crafting and settlement building comes in. The building system is really what sets Fallout 4 apart from the earlier games for me. Looting stops being about just upgrading gear or selling junk. It becomes purposeful. You start caring about finding oil, ceramic plates, and circuitry boards, because those are the things you need to enable the settlement you've just rescued to survive and defend themselves. There's something incredibly rewarding about seeing Sanctuary slowly change from a ruin into something that actually feels like the home it once was. It's a loop that feeds into itself. Exploring gives you materials, materials let you build, and building gives you a sense of ownership in the wasteland. And the progression system complements that nicely. Fallout 4 merges the old skill system into the perk system, and it feels cleaner because of it. Every level gives you a perk point, and how you choose to spend those points actually defines your playstyle in a meaningful way. You can push your special stats higher, or unlock new perks, or build on perks you've already taken. Once your build starts to take shape, the game becomes really satisfying to play. Personally, I always end up dumping points into Charisma, so I can talk my way out of absolutely everything. That started for me in Fallout 3, carried all the way through New Vegas, and that's how I still approach any game with branching narratives, like Fallout and the Outer Worlds. If there's a conversation option that lets me avoid a firefight, I'm taking it. Exploration has always been a core part of Fallout's identity, and Fallout 4 maintains that sense of discovery. There's always something tucked away somewhere, and when you combine that with a crafting system, even finding a single component makes a difference. That's where the game feels at its best. The combat, for me, has never been Fallout's strong suit. The gunplay is serviceable, especially compared to older titles, but I still find myself relying on VATS more often than not because the game feels designed around it. Again, that might just be the playstyle I gravitate towards. I put points into charisma, lockpicking, and hacking, so I'm quite literally building a character who avoids shooting unless absolutely necessary. The one mechanic I was a little less sold on was how central power armor feels this time around. In earlier Fallout games, it felt like a late game prize, something you grew into. Here, you get it very early on, and the game pushes its importance a bit more heavily. It isn't necessarily bad, but depending on your build, it can feel like you're being nudged towards a playstyle you might not actually want. For me, it sometimes felt like wearing heavy armor when I'd rather be slipping through a conversation unseen. But overall, the gameplay does evolve as you move through the game. As your character grows, so does your influence on the world, and the options available to you in dialogue and exploration. It's a feedback loop that keeps the game engaging well beyond the main story. The Commonwealth is one of those worlds that just pulls you in without needing to shout for your attention. Fallout has always been great at crafting these desolate, broken landscapes, and Fallout 4 continues that tradition. It's not a world that's meant to look pretty. It's harsh, worn, and full of decay, and that's exactly why it works. You can feel the weight of what's been lost just by walking through it. Every collapsed building or rusted vehicle tells you some small part of the story, and that sense of atmosphere makes even the quieter moments feel meaningful. What keeps the world immersive isn't just the scenery though, it's the threats that live in it. At any point you're 2 steps away from a pack of raiders, or a group of super mutants shouting across a ruined street, or a sentry bot deciding, today is the day you die. And of course, the moment you think you're safe, a deathclaw barrels out of the ground and reminds you that confidence in the wasteland is a mistake. The world itself is constantly pushing back at you. It makes exploration feel tense, exciting, and rewarding all at once. Despite the "it's all wasteland" idea, Fallout 4 does actually offer a surprising amount of variety in its environments. The Commonwealth shifts as you move. You get abandoned suburbs, industrial ruins, swamps, glowing, irradiated craters, and even areas where remnants of old world wealth are still clinging on. It's grim, but it all fits the tone perfectly. Visually, the game sits in a space where it doesn't need to look cutting edge to feel right. Fallout has never been about pristine graphics, it's about mood, and because the art direction leans into the wasteland aesthetic, it holds up surprisingly well even years later. It feels timeless in the sense that the world shouldn't look clean or polished anyway. If anything, a better looking Fallout would feel wrong. In terms of performance, my most recent playthrough on the PC was smooth. A few lighting glitches here and there, and there was one moment during a quest with Paladin Dance where a dialogue trigger didn't fire, so I had to reload an earlier save. But that's almost part of the Fallout experience at this point. Nothing game breaking, just the usual Bethesda charm. The audio design is one of those things that sits in the background doing work you don't consciously notice until it stops. The soundtrack isn't trying to be cinematic or epic, it's more of an atmosphere setter, just enough to fill the space without drawing attention to itself. And when the quiet breaks, like when you hear a super mutant yell, "Someone there!" it hits exactly the way it should. What really stands out though is the voice acting. Fallout 4's characters are given life through the way they perform. The tone, the pacing, the subtle cracks of vulnerability or aggression, this is where the game sells its world. You believe these people have lived through what the world has become, and that connection is part of what makes the story work. The UI and menus feel familiar if you've played previous Fallout games. Everything runs through the Pip-Boy again. Your gear, quests, stats, perks, all handled on that wrist interface. It's a smart design choice because it keeps everything in-world. You're not jumping into a clean, modern menu system that breaks immersion. You're interacting with something that exists in the world your character lives in. It's clunky in a very Fallout way, but intentionally so, and it still works. In terms of replayability, there's a lot here. The big one is the faction system. Your allegiances genuinely change the path of the story and the ending you get. If you choose to see how things play out differently, you need more than just one run. And that's before you even get into character builds. You can go full stealth, heavy weapons, melee bruiser, sniper, speech and charisma focused. You get a very different feel depending on how you shape your character. Difficulty settings can push you further into survival decision making if you want a more intense experience. As for value, there's a lot of game here. Even the base game alone is stacked with quests, exploration, and side stories. If you're considering the Anniversary Edition, that's even more content layered on top with the DLCs. At the time of writing, I couldn't find the exact price of the Anniversary Edition. The Game of the Year Edition sits around 34 quid with everything included, which is generally strong value if you want something to sink hours into. And if you already own it, it's worth revisiting. Consider this your sign. So, wrapping up Fallout 4, this isn't a game about mind-blowing visuals or an epic soundtrack. What it does deliver, and does incredibly well, is a fully immersive, role-playing experience through storytelling and exploration. That's really where the heart of Fallout lies. Fallout games have always been about creating these incredible, living worlds where you feel like every choice matters, and Fallout 4 continues that tradition while adding even more features to dig into. The world building, exploration, and side quests all come together beautifully. Would I recommend it? Absolutely. If you've never played Fallout 4, the Anniversary Edition is a perfect way to jump in. You get all the DLCs, the Creation Club content, and a pretty seamless way to experience the full game. And even if you've played it before, there's enough here to make it worth revisiting. Especially if you've been curious about the added content, or just want to relive the wasteland. What does Fallout 4 do better than other games in the genre? Its storytelling and exploration are top tier. The world itself feels alive by creating a unique atmosphere and an aesthetic look that feels timeless, coupled with the exploration and danger around every corner. This, in my opinion, is unmatched. On my personal rating scale, I'm giving Fallout 4 the weekend binge rating. The storytelling and exploration are absolutely top notch, and the post-apocalyptic world is perfectly crafted. My only small gripe is the combat, which for me doesn't feel quite as satisfying as it could. Don't get me wrong, these games aren't really about the combat, but if it were just a little tighter, this would easily be an all-nighter for me. It hurts me not to give it the top rating because I've generally loved every Fallout game I've played. So, that's it for me. Do you agree with my rating? Are you planning on revisiting the Commonwealth 10 years after its original release? Or if you're new, are you picking up the Anniversary Edition? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And if you've made it this far, don't forget to smash that thumbs up and subscribe for more game reviews. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!